In a world that never stops talking, the loudest voice is often the one that stays silent. This is the journey of a man who learned that true power isn't found in the noise of the crowd, but in the deliberate weight of a single, thoughtful word. Master your silence, and you will master your world. In the gilded halls of Orizon, Aris was a rising star, a man whose tongue was as sharp as a duelist's blade. He believed that to be respected, one had to be heard, and to be feared, one had to have the fastest wit in the room. Chapter 1. The Torrent of Tongues. The grand banquet for the Valyrian delegation was Aris's biggest stage yet. Crystal chandeliers hummed with light, and the air was thick with the scent of spiced wine and heavy diplomacy. Aris sat at the high table, surrounded by the powerful and the proud. Across from him sat Ambassador Valerius, a man whose face was a map of stoic lines. The conversation turned to the precarious nature of the northern trade routes, the very lifeblood of Valerius. Aris, feeling the wine and the urge to impress, saw an opening for a perfect joke. The Valyrian routes are so well guarded, Aris quipped, a smirk playing on his lips, that even the gold is too bored to travel them. Perhaps if your merchants spent less time praying and more time riding, the routes wouldn't be so quiet. The room erupted. Orizon's nobles roared with laughter, slapping the table in delight. Aris beamed, basking in the immediate dopamine hit of approval. He felt like a master of the room, but he didn't notice the ambassador's hand tightening around his glass until the knuckle turned white. He didn't see the silent look exchanged between the Valyrian aides. By the time the laughter died down, the warmth had left the room. The ambassador stood up, bowed curtly to the king, and walked out without another word. The next morning, the joke had traveled back to the Valyrian border. A trade embargo was signed by noon, and by sunset, Orizon's economy was in a tailspin. Aris stood in his study, looking at the wreckage of his career. He hadn't meant any harm, he was just being funny. But he realized then that his words weren't just sound, they were impact. He had thrown a stone into a still pond, and the ripples were now coming back to drown him. He realized that a quick tongue is often just a mask for a shallow mind. Desperate to reclaim his shattered reputation, Aris sought out the Echo Oracle in the desolate Whispering Canyons. It was a place where the geography itself acted as a judge. The narrow, limestone walls were so perfectly smooth that every sound was magnified tenfold and bounced for minutes before fading. Chapter 2. The Echo Chamber of the Oracle. When Aris entered the main cavern, he was frantic. He began to explain his mistake at the banquet, his words tumbling out in a desperate, rapid fire stream. I didn't mean it, you see. It was just a joke, a simple quip to lighten the mood, but the ambassador took it the wrong way and now, his own voice thundered back at him from the darkness. The sheer volume of his own panic was physically painful. Every time he tried to add a, but or an, if, the echo grew louder, a chaotic storm of his own making. He was literally being shouted down by his own lack of restraint. The oracle, a woman who moved as silently as a shadow, stood in the center of the roar, her eyes closed. She didn't speak until the last vibration of Aris's voice had died into a hollow hum. To speak here, she whispered, and even her whisper hummed through the air, is to live with your words long after they leave your mouth. In Orizon, you spoke and the world moved. Here, you speak and you are the one who must endure the impact. She handed Aris a heavy, smooth stone. Hold this. Every time you feel the urge to fill the silence, feel the weight of this rock. Your words are like stones thrown into a glasshouse. Once they leave your hand, you can no longer protect the windows. For 3 days, Aris sat in the oppressive silence of the cave. He realized his biggest fear wasn't the ambassador or the embargo. It was the uncomfortable emptiness of not being the one talking. He had been using speech as a shield, a way to prevent others from truly seeing him. By the 3rd night, Aris stopped rehearsing his excuses. He learned that if he didn't feed the echo, the cavern was a place of profound peace. He began to understand the oracle's warning. A word is a prisoner while it is in your mind. Once it escapes, you are its prisoner. Leaving the echo chamber, Aris was given a final task by the oracle. He was forbidden from speaking a single word until he had mastered the 3 filtered gates. Chapter 3. The 3 filtered gates. He returned to the bustling markets of Orizon, but he moved through them like a ghost. His tongue, once a restless engine, now felt heavy and deliberate. The oracle had commanded him to visualize 3 massive iron gates in his throat. Before any thought could become a sound, it had to pass through all 3. The first gate. Is it true? Aris was shocked to find how much of his daily speech was built on half-truths, exaggerated stories to make himself look better, or rumors passed along to seem informed. Most of his witty retorts dissolved right here. If he wasn't 100% certain of a fact, the gate remained barred. The second gate. Is it necessary? This was the hardest gate for Aris. He realized he spoke mostly to fill the uncomfortable silence or to assert his presence in a room. He watched his fellow diplomats chatter about the weather, the wine, and each other. He saw how their necessary words were actually just noise. By the second day, he realized that 90% of human conversation is just a way to avoid being alone with one's own thoughts. The third gate. Is it kind? The final gate was the narrowest. Even if something was true and seemingly necessary, was it intended to build up or tear down? Aris remembered his joke at the banquet. It was true, in its own cynical way, and necessary for his ego, but it was fundamentally unkind. By the third day, Aris was almost entirely silent. But something miraculous happened. Because he wasn't talking, he began to hear. He heard the fear in a merchant's voice when discussing the embargo. He heard the genuine wisdom in a servant's passing remark. He realized that silence wasn't a void, it was a power. By not speaking, he was gathering information that everyone else was too busy talking to notice. He had stopped being a prisoner of his words, and had become a master of his perspective. Returning to the court of Orizon, Aris was no longer the man who lived to hear his own voice. He brought with him a new, invisible tool, the weighted breath. Chapter 4. The weighted breath. The palace was as chaotic as ever, a nest of rumors and rapid-fire arguments. But Aris moved through it like a deep-sea diver through a churning surface. He established a new ritual. Before responding to any question, provocation, or even a greeting, he would take one full, deliberate breath. In the high-stakes meetings of the council, his peers tried to bait him. Tell us, Aris, a rival sneered, has the Echo Oracle taught you to be a mute, or are you just finally out of jokes? The old Aris would have had a cutting retort ready before the rival finished. Instead, the new Aris sat perfectly still. He felt the air enter his lungs, cool and grounding, and leave them, slow and steady. That 3-second pause changed the entire chemistry of the room. By the time Aris was ready to speak, the rival's smug grin had begun to falter. The silence acted as a mirror, reflecting the other man's insecurity back at him. When Aris finally spoke, his words were like the meditation in the image, calm, centered, and undeniably powerful. He didn't defend himself. He simply addressed the task at hand with a precision that left no room for argument. He realized that most people speak to react, but he was now speaking to respond. The weighted breath was his anchor. It prevented his ego from hijacking his tongue. He had learned that the most influential person in the room isn't the one who speaks the most, but the one who can hold the silence without flinching. The summit for the Treaty of the Silent Peak was held in a chamber where every whisper seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 lives. Across the obsidian table sat Ambassador Valerius, the man whose pride Aris had wounded a year prior. The air was thick with the static of unresolved grudges. Chapter 5. The Treaty of the Silent Peak. Valerius wasted no time. I see Orizon has sent their court jester to discuss our borders, he spat, his voice echoing with practiced malice. Tell me, Aris, have you prepared a joke for our starving merchants, or shall we just wait for you to stumble over your own ego again? The provocation was a masterstroke, designed to trigger the old Aris, the one who would have met fire with fire. The room held its breath. Aris felt the familiar heat rise in his chest. But then, he remembered the Echo Oracle. He felt the metaphorical stone in his hand. He took his weighted breath, inhaling the tension and exhaling the need to be right. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. The ambassador's smirk began to twitch. By refusing to react, Aris had denied Valerius his target. The power in the room shifted. It flowed toward the man who was comfortable in the stillness. When Aris finally spoke, his voice was like the lake in the image, cool, deep, and perfectly reflective. I have no jokes today, Ambassador, Aris said softly. Only the truth. The embargo has hurt your people as much as mine. We are two tired nations arguing over a bridge while the river beneath us dries up. I am not here to defend my past, but to secure our future. He laid out the terms of the treaty with a surgical precision that left no room for petty rebuttals. Because he had filtered his words through the 3 gates, there was nothing for Valerius to attack. There was no ego to bruise, only a solution to accept. Valerius looked into Aris's eyes and saw a man who had mastered the most difficult terrain of all, himself. Without a word, the ambassador reached for the quill and signed. Aris realized then that his greatest victory wasn't the treaty. It was the discovery that in the depths of silence, the mind discovers its power. He was no longer a prisoner of his words, he was the architect of his peace. It's time to stop letting your words be unguided arrows. Aris's journey proves that the most influential person in the room isn't the one who speaks the most, but the one who can hold the silence. Now, it's your turn to master the weighted breath. 1. Identify your Valerius. Think of one person or situation that consistently baits you into reacting impulsively. 2. Apply the 3 gates. Before you speak today, ask yourself, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If it fails even one, keep it as a prisoner in your mind. 3. Take the weighted breath. Practice a full, deliberate pause before answering any question today. Use those 3 seconds to choose your impact rather than just reacting. Don't let your tongue build a cage for your future. Start your silent peak training today and reclaim the power of your presence.